Welcome to another wonderful edition of Words, Images, and Worlds, always talking about books and authors. And on this episode, glad to be chatting with author Kai Leeks. Kai, thank you for joining.
To be here.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. I'll mention a few titles here and then we can roam through a couple of questions that I have for you. So, A Darkness Within, uh, collection of yours, Oni's Tears, The Sin Eater's Chronicles, and right behind you on the screen, there are other titles as well, a few that I mentioned, as well as a few others. Yeah, love it, love it. Celebrating women in horror, absolutely. What led you to writing, and I suppose what led you to horror specifically as well?
Um, what initially led me to writing in general was just I always had stories in my mind just to keep me occupied growing up. I'm an 80s baby. So, we all grew up on those of us that are 80s babies, just grew up um TV, grew up on we were literally grew up on books and things. We were the generation that still had books still in our
Mm.
faces, but we also at the same time had television in our faces. So, that unique combination led me to having a very whimsical mind that kept me entertained. So growing up and being a 90s kid, that latchkey generation as well, I had to keep myself entertained. So I always had these stories in my mind and I never had the idea to actually write them out. Um, if you know the idea of a griot or the idea of a person that has a gift of oral storytelling. I always had that gift, but I just never thought to write them out. So eventually, in my college years, that's when I officially began writing them out. And so, I always loved fantasy. I always loved vampires. So that led me to the dark side of things. The love of vampires came in my elementary years, oddly enough. Um, and so then that led me to, R.L. Stein, led me to um Dracula, Bram Stoker. Loved that movie. But then I also read the book and loved the book. And then it led me to Anne Rice. And then when
Mhm.
she stopped writing, and at that time I was a teenager then. Actually, no, I wasn't. I was still a little tyke teenage, no, a kid. But when she finished writing, that's when I was a teenager. And that led me to Tenerife. And I spoke to her through an email, and she led me to LA Banks.
Mhm.
And those two women, Anne Rice and LA Banks, tandem, shaped me deeply to where I was, to where I write, and you will see the influence in my writing. Those two women shaped me greatly, and that's where my cusp of darkness is. I'm forever a fantasy person because I'm also a blurred, so I'm a
Mhm.
geek. So I love my comic books. So I love Marvel, and I'm an X-Men fanatic. So Storm is my girl. Dark Phoenix
Nice.
was my girl. Jean Grey, she got on my nerves, but when she turned into Dark Phoenix, that was my girl.
Mhm. Mhm.
Rogue was my girl. So those things came together and shaped me, and it shapes my writing. So I flip between mainly romance because, again, I'm an 80s baby. My mother knew I loved reading, so she gave me all the books, and I
Mhm.
stayed in all the libraries. And Barnes and Noble, when that came to fruition, if I stepped in the Barnes and Noble, and my mother can attest to this, if I stepped in the Barnes and Noble, I would go ghost. Like immediately when I go into the door, she would go, "Where
Mhm.
is she? Where is she?" And I would be over in the fantasy area, just sitting on the floor, looking through all the little books, and that was my hubble. So, that again, that shaped me. So fantasy and romance, she would give me romance books. So Nora Roberts was my other cusp. She shaped me
Mhm.
as well. Those silly little Harley Quinn books shaped me. And so you will see all of those sparkles through all of my writing. So I stick into like a hub of para romance, but really when we get into talking more about sin eaters, I learned, and I didn't even catch it myself because I write more of a off the cuff kind of thing. So when my readers speak to me, that's when it enlightens me. And so they were telling me, you say this is para-romance, but this is not para-romance. This is more of a horror thriller thing going on here. And so that's what led me to saying, I write horror as well. So I hope that
Nice.
answered a little bit.
Yeah, I love the
Lovely.
all the influences.
Yes.
How do you move from creative space to creative space, like genre to genre? Is that something intentional, or is that kind of following that part of you that comes from that place?
It's not intentional. It's more of a mood, I guess it is. It's a mood of what
Hmm.
I'm feeling or how the characters speak to me because they literally speak to me in my mind. I know that sounds kind of schizophrenic, kind of medical, but they do speak to me in my mind, and they're all rooted in speculative fiction. I have to say that umbrella because that's what it is, fantasy. And so if I'm feeling like vampires, then the vampire is going to speak to me and say, "Hey, knock, knock, knock," and tell me their story. If I'm feeling romance strictly, that's who's going to speak to me. And so it's just a mood of what I want because growing up, I was not giving a representation of me. And that also led me into writing. I wanted a representation of me growing up as an 80s baby and 90s kid. I did not see enough of me. And that was the stickler into also what made me eventually move into actually putting the ideas that were in my head onto paper. Because when Anne Rice finished, I loved her world. And I love that she did the one book with the Mayweather, which is where she transitioned and brought the vampires in. And then you got
Hmm.
to see some African American black vampires kind of sprinkled in there and witches. And it wasn't enough for me. And that's where I was like, oh. And then, of course, we know the movie was made, that movie. And I say that
Hmm.
movie.
Hmm.
And my favorite ended up being my favorite, though that movie wasn't my favorite. I have to be honest, it wasn't. But the character she brought breath into life, how she settled into it. And I'm gonna be honest here because I know we're recording. I'm gonna be honest here, and I say it on my page.
Hmm.
It wasn't the best acting. However, she did give a vibrancy to that character. My queen. And so I was like, when Anne accepted Aaliyah as that character, I was like, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that representation. Thank you. And then that led me into saying, I need to see more of me. And then when Tanner Reeve told me about LA Banks, that's when my world turned upside down and I was so happy and in tears, honestly. And that led me into writing my vampires.
I love that. Yeah. Well, as you've been embarking on this world and as you've been writing, how has your process changed? How's your vision changed?
See, yeah, my process has changed a lot. My vision has stayed the same. I still want to do representation of me, of my culture, in the sense of because I'm so heavy-handed and I'm connected into watching. I'm such a TV and movie person. I stay watching TV and movies, so that kind of world, I get irritated a lot, and so
Hmm.
because of that irritation, it pushes me to write more, which is a good thing. Even though you don't see that many of my books out there, there was situations behind the scenes where I had to stop. But um, watching my TV, watching my, Hollywood medium, and now that's led me now to K-dramas. Love K-dramas. Um,
Hmm.
I find myself following different genres in that kind of realm too. It all interweaves into how I write, and it has changed how s- changed my view of how I write my POV of my different characters. Um, I still advocate showcasing Black narratives. I still advocate showing what I grew up with, what grew up in my environment. So I had a diverse environment of people around me. It was majority Black, yes, but I had white friends, I had Hispanic friends, I had Asian friends, and so you will see that in all of my books. Um, I made a cognitive note to dip my hat in and test myself in different genres of writing, still in my same style. So in romance, I've now tested doing IR, so interracial romance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Something I didn't do before. Though in Senators you do see that connections going on in there too, but it just never was like a standstill book. I did my first standstill with my romance with my Brothers of Commit series, and more recent third book in that series, which is The Rules of Pleasure. And that character is a biracial Asian man. He is Korean, and but his ethnic background, his half of his background, his family has um Japanese, Korean background, as well as American Korean background, but he's also Caribbean African American. Two parents, one is Jamaican, the other is African American. So he's multiracial in that kind of way. And I wanted to reflect that because you don't see that a lot
Mm-hmm.
in romance. And so I gave that story there. And so that was one little note. And that came out of my frustration in representation on Hollywood again, influencing me. Um, Another, which would now lead me back to what I was going to say with Sin Eaters, that came about because, as well as it was a story that was being written long ago when I was in college. But I officially decided to write it to share that story when I was watching Heroes. I
Oh
got
yes.
upset
Uh-huh.
with Heroes. I was like, I'm tired of the same trope of save the cheerleader, save the world. And it's
Mm-hmm.
always the same looking little girl. Tired,
Yes.
tired, tired, tired. And it was the same thing happening in the books that I was reading before that series. So I was like, I have to do something. And that's how I introduced the world to Sun and Senators.
Nice. Nice. I'm glad your books are out there. Glad that you've taken this journey. What are you working on now, and where can we find more about you?
Not on the fantasy tip. Well, it's twofold. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to do a special edition of a re-release for Sin Eaters. A very special hardback copy. I want to do it special. I want to make it how I envisioned that book to look like in physical form for the longest. I described it very well in this book of
Mm-hmm.
how it's supposed to look. And then I don't want to give it to you all in your hands, how it's supposed to look, seriously look in the physical sense in your hands. Um, After that, it may be a Senators 3 coming.
Nice. Nice.
And if you all have read my short and Slay, um, it's a standalone vampire story. I'm attempting to break that out and make that its own novel as well.
Well, Kai, many thanks for the conversation. Many thanks for the work. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure to include before we close out?
You can find me at kyleeks.com. You can find me at Facebook. You can find me at Instagram and Threads. I think that's Blue Sky. Yeah.
Mhm. All
And
right.
if you want to
Awesome.
talk to me about my books, feel free to talk to me. I'm here. I'm game.